How do you give a film atmosphere? Is it rain and fog? Is it a certain type of lighting or camera motion? Is it sound design? And beyond that, what even is atmosphere? I mean, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that, but I certainly couldn't put a clean definition to it, and certainly not a clean list of techniques to follow to achieve it. But a few weeks ago, I did a project that made me want to try. My name is Aidin Robbins, I'm a filmmaker, I do videos here on Adorama TV, and a few weeks ago, I finished up a video all about these weird, kind of mysterious volcanoes in Arizona. This video is about science, particularly deep time and geological mysteries. It also depicts a very extraterrestrial looking landscape and has these side stories about the moon landing and weird cosmic art. So naturally, it needed kind of a weird sci-fi vibe. It needed atmosphere. Today, I want to walk you through how I made this project and how every stage of the process ultimately contributed back to giving this video a weird, spacey atmosphere, whatever that is. The best way to plan out your film's atmosphere in advance is by creating a mood board, just an arrangement of visual references that you can look at and get a quick at-a-glance view of your project's overall vibe. It's also a really helpful tool for sharing with collaborators and giving them an idea of the project's vibe. This video's mood board is all over the place. Got some weird landscapes, some unique lighting references, some frames from 2001: A Space Odyssey, got some Courage the Cowardly Dog in there too. One of the earliest, most basic techniques for giving this video a weird atmosphere was just finding the weirdest locations. There are more than 600 volcanoes in this little area, so I spent a lot of time just poking around on satellite maps looking for the weirdest looking ones. The volcanoes with the most unique, smoothed out shapes and the least vegetation that were the most barren, just looking for the landscapes that appeared the most alien. I also sourced some weird research documents to include, like this labeled map of all the volcanoes and this digital elevation model. Now pre-production was done, I'd found some very alien landscapes and I could go out to Arizona and photograph them in a very alien way. From the ground, this landscape is beautiful and fascinating, but it doesn't quite look like another planet. The key to really showing its alien appearance would be to photograph it from above. And that's why this video has a ton of aerials. That was just the best way to show off the form of the landscape. But a drone shot from the ground next to a volcano still wasn't quite enough. Most of these cones are about 1,000 feet tall. So to really show off the craters on top of them, I had to get up onto one, then launch the drone even higher. I used a DJI Air 3 for this video, mostly because of the 70mm camera. That allowed me to isolate the strangest parts of the landscape and compress the landscape, emphasizing just how many volcanoes are in a small area. Almost all of the drone shots in this video were shot at sunrise or sunset, which helped to bring out the existing warm colors in the landscape. That low light also helped to make the volcanoes stand out from the landscape around them, accentuate the shape of the craters on top of them, and cast these insane pyramid-shaped shadows. I also shot a lot of footage looking straight into the sun, and the haze and backlighting helped to further simplify the landscape, reducing it to its most basic volcanic shapes. Now for the indoor shots, I wanted it to feel almost like we were shooting in a lab. Very cool and clinical, but with that same intense light and deep shadows. For the most part, I lit these with my Aputure 120D angled off to the side with the light dome on the front. That gave everything a nice, smooth, soft white light, but also allowed for some deep shadows since I wasn't using a fill light. For a couple of macro shots, I wanted an even harsher light, so I backlit them with a single, tiny Godox light panel. That way, almost the entire frame is in deep shadow, with just a few bright highlights jumping out. I also modified the items in frame to give them a more clinical, lab-like appearance, converting all of my photos, maps, and documents to black and white, and swapping my usual wooden desk for this lab table, by which I mean baking sheet. For this lava tube sequence, I originally intended to illuminate entire sections of the cave using multiple light panels, but once I started shooting, I really liked the look that I got from just using my headlamp. I like how it illuminates the immediate area and then lets everything else fall into complete darkness. It's much more immersive, and it's just so spooky and uncomfortable. And this was a spooky and uncomfortable place to shoot. This video has a very simple color palette. Half of it is all orange, and half of it is all blue. And I achieved that look mostly using the color wheels to pump orange and yellow into the highlights and midtones, or bluish green into the shadows. For both the orange footage and the blue footage, I went dark and contrasty to allow for those deep shadows and let much of the landscape be obscured. I also denoised most of the drone shots using a plugin called Neat Video, mostly out of necessity because I shot them at the wrong ISO and they're noisy, but it had this effect of really smoothing out the textures of the cones, making them appear almost unnaturally smooth, which actually ended up really helping that alien appearance. Probably my favorite technique for achieving the atmosphere in this project was bringing along this VHS camcorder to capture weird scenery. The footage out of this thing looks terrible. It's perfect. To me, this footage feels nostalgic, but not in a comforting way, in like a weird, creepy way. I've done a similar thing on past projects by shooting on 8mm film, which has a completely different, but still absolutely wonderful atmosphere. The nostalgia and melancholy is absolutely unmatched. Honestly, a lot of the best techniques for adding atmosphere to your footage involve making the footage just a little bit worse. Rain on the lens, film grain, light leaks, the shutter drag, the list goes on. And finally, listen very closely. Arguably the most effective tool for creating atmosphere in your films is not visual, it's sound. To give this project a more spacey atmosphere, I picked out music that had a lot of synths and droning bass and just kind of generally weird, spacey sounds. And I also used a lot of droning ambient sound, some eerie desert wind, the rumbling of the volcanoes underground, magma bubbling, the hum of the VHS camera. The right sound design can give you goosebumps and shivers. It can make you feel very tense and uncomfortable in a way that visuals unfortunately just can't. It can impact you on a much more visceral level if it's used right. So, if you're a filmmaker and you want to add atmosphere to your films, don't let that go to waste. The cool thing about atmosphere is that it's entirely subjective. It's about how images and sounds make you feel, and you really can't possibly pin down specific rules or techniques for that. I mean, these were the techniques that I used to create this atmosphere on this project, but I might use completely different techniques to create a completely different atmosphere on a different project, and you might even use different techniques to create the same atmosphere on the same project. In all of the different elements of filmmaking, lighting, composition, camera movement, atmosphere is probably the most subjective, and I think that makes it arguably the most fun. And that being said, I would love to hear your takes in the comments of this video. What techniques do you use to create atmosphere in your own projects? Again, it's completely subjective, so literally anything goes. I hope you've enjoyed this video, learned something new from it. If you did, be sure to subscribe to Adorama TV for thousands of other videos just like this one, including a bunch of other videos in this series where we talk about all of the various elements and techniques of the craft of filmmaking. Lighting, composition, camera movement, you name it. So thank you again for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.